1st, 2025. First order of business is introduction. Since this is being recorded, we are recording at this point. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Jason Morat, board chair.
Alex Armand ACEDC.
I'm Anna Bouchard. I'm their housing intern for the summer.
Camille Lyons, ACEDC.
Mark Foster, board.
Richard McCurr, ACEDC.
Rennie Perry, city. Are we supposed to say who we're representing?
If you're in a designated seat, yeah.
City
All right.
represents.
Well, I'll go back to Middlebury then.
Just Lafayette, board member.
Nicole, ACEDC.
I don't believe our online guests need to introduce themselves, as they'll already show up in the recording. So this is more so when someone comes in to view the recording, you know who's here. Next order of business, changes to the agenda. We have a draft agenda. Does anyone have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda? Additions, subtractions, or a motion to approve?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion's carried. Next item of business would be our July meeting minutes. Those were in the packet and SharePoint. We have a motion to accept. Moved
Second.
and second. Are there any changes? Or any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion's carried. And the staff activities report from the few Alex.
Yes, thank you, Jason. So staff activity report is available for full review on SharePoint. A couple highlights that I will share. Of course, the somber news today is that Camille will be leaving us to relocate to Portland, Oregon with her partner. The good news in that is that we will continue to have Camille working with us on a remote basis through mid-January. So we're very grateful that she's agreed to stay on and help us in the very critical role that she plays. So in that role, Camille will continue doing grant administration, specifically for our Grow Tourism grant that we administer with the Chamber. In addition, she will continue doing administration of our NBRC Catalyst grants, and she will continue to offer grant assistance and support with several of the clients we work with on somewhat of an ongoing basis and folks we've been working with more recently. She'll also be helping with administration of the BGS Building Community Grant Program, which we do year to year. That program is delayed this year. We are still awaiting an announcement from the state. Typically, that program is announced in July, with applications open in August and September deadline. Due to changes at the state, they are a little behind schedule. We continue to check in with them so that we are prepared for when that program is announced. But Camille, true to form, has kind of been ahead of the curve on that and engaging many of the businesses that we've met with throughout this year to get statements of interest and project descriptions to ensure that as soon as that program is open, we are ready to move quickly on that. Otherwise, our work at the Middlebury Industrial Park continues to advance. We will have a project update meeting on that next week, so we'll have a more substantive update at next month's meeting. We are, of course, beginning to plan around a transition in staffing with Camille's departure. We don't want to wait until January to figure out where we're going next. So that is something I'm in discussions with the executive committee on, and we'll present a more detailed plan at next month's meeting. Otherwise, I will report that loan activity continues to be more steady than we've seen in a while. We currently have one application that's been submitted that will be reviewed by the loan committee the first week of September. In addition to that, we have another application that's been submitted that we are just awaiting a lending partner on, but that could likely come to the loan committee later in September. And then we have a third pending application that we're actively working with a potential borrower on. As far as loans go, again, this is a pickup in activity compared to what we've seen over the last 18 months, which is exciting. However, as folks are likely aware, we do continue to face the challenge of recapitalizing our USARD funds. Currently, they stand around $250,000 in that ballpark. We did finally get some feedback from the USDA staff in Montpelier. Basically, what we've learned is that the one thing really holding back our recent applications is a lack of matching funds. So by providing $25,000 in matching funds, we would get, I believe, 10 additional points. If we provide $50,000 in matching funds, that would be 15 additional points. And that, from what we've been told, would likely get us over the hump and get us a $500,000 recapitalization. I am awaiting the outcome of our current application. We'll hopefully get a decision on that in the coming months. Once we have that decision, we will have a more substantive conversation around matching funds. One option would be to use funds in our ACEDC revolving loan fund. Those have kind of been sitting there inactive for a while now. We'll discuss those towards a match, but again, I think we can get into that once we have some clarity around our current application. But something to bear in mind, again, we do want to prepare so that we're not getting to a point where we have no funds to lend out and have high demand. So
Is it a 100-point scale? Just curious.
do you know
I
something?
don't recall, but I don't think it's good. I think 10 is significant. And that's the feedback we've gotten from the state is that if we had a match, we'd be much more competitive. So I think it's a tight margin up top.
The last thing I'll share is as far as our housing and development work, again, this has been sort of a new priority for us this year, but a big priority. We continue to actively work with the town of Middlebury and the city of Virgins on some development specific work. I'll refrain from going into too much detail on that right now, since it is a public meeting and we just want to respect the privacy of some of those discussions. Also excited to report that I met with the new Bristol Town Administrator last week. He will be joining our board in the appointed Bristol seat here, like the beginning of September. But that gives us an opportunity, I think, to really start building a relationship with the towns where we can focus on supporting development in a similar way to what we've been doing here in Middlebury and Virgins. So I will leave it at that for now with staff reports, but happy to answer any questions or go into more detail on anything specific if folks would like.
Any questions for Alex? Good stuff. All right, next would be, at this point, opportunity for citizens and board members to raise and address issues that are not included on the agenda. Does anyone have anything that they want to bring forth at this point? We'll go back to you, Alex, for the grant policy update.
Yes, so as folks will recall, we reviewed some recommended changes to our grant policy update last month. Just to review, the two really specific items that we discussed were, first of all, the process for board approval of grant applications. Our prior or our existing policy required that anytime we do a grant application, whether it was a grant for ACEDC specifically in our operations or a grant that we were completing on behalf of a client or a community partner, that we would require board approval. What we found specifically over the last couple of months was several grant opportunities that were announced with a very short window to apply. And in the time it would take to engage potential clients, have conversations around what those services would look like and to meet the deadline, we were just going to miss a lot of opportunities. So what we discussed last month was altering that policy to allow staff to be a little more nimble and flexible in executing agreements for grant services. The feedback that we got from the board was that they saw it as really an operational thing, that there was support to empower me as a director as well as staff to use our discretion to execute grant services agreements to fulfill our mission. So I'll show you here in a moment how updates to the policy reflect that change. The other aspect of the policy that we are updating is our fee structure. This is something Camille worked really hard on to create a fee policy that allows us to recoup a little bit of revenue from the amount of time we spend on grants, but was really designed to compel membership and drive membership. So really favors folks who sign up for membership, and I think gives them some pretty friendly fees for services, or in many cases waives those fees. So I'll go through that in a little more detail here in a moment, but just so folks are aware, the prior fee for services that we were using was the assistant director's hourly rate plus fringe benefits plus indirect costs. Of course, we don't have an assistant director at the moment. That policy was really written specifically around Karen's position. In addition, if we reuse that formula, we could have been looking at, I think, 60, 80, maybe more an hour charging, nonprofits and municipalities who frankly just wouldn't have been able to afford it. So I think we have a more workable, more adaptable policy now. So what we have here on the screen is what I call our clean copy. So this is the policy as it will be adopted and passed into record, if you will. But I'm going to bring up our March copy here just so I can call out the specific changes that have been made. So this Word doc includes highlights. These highlights just show again specifically where language is either added or changed. And there's just a few places here, so I'm going to run through them real quick. This first one, again, is really just an overview of the policy. Previously, this language read that any grant application would require that board approval. Now, again, it says that those decisions will be made at the discretion of the executive director with reporting to the board of trustees. So, of course, as a matter of practice, we will continue to report to the board on any grant work we are doing. We just won't be coming to ask for approval with every new application. So as far as financial administration, nothing changed there. It was really section 3, grant procedures, and then the following section, grant application for approval, that changed. So really here in this highlighted section, I'm not going to go through it word by word, but what this does is really reflect almost verbatim the policy that Camille put together. So first of all, talking here specifically about pursuing grants that align with our goals, as well as the goal of REDS and SEDS. One update I forgot to mention, we did complete our REDS draft recently that has been sent to ACRPC and our committee. So excited with that as well. Letters of support. Here we will provide letters of support to members. So if a member is applying for a grant and they just want a letter of support, we will provide that to them. As far as standard applications, you can see this is really for application support. So when we're not writing the application, but just providing support, we will support non-members at a flat fee of $50 for up to 10 hours of work and $100 for 10 to 20 hours, $25 an hour for work exceeding 20. Again, that's for work supporting an application, not where we're actually writing the application. But we do see this quite a bit where folks come to us and say, hey, I want to apply for a grant, but I need data, I need information, I need consultation. So for members, we will do that for free. For non-members, we will require that hourly fee because those hours can add up pretty quick as we walk people through that. Administration, this is pretty standard and really kind of reflects the policy we've used for a long time, where in most cases we will apply a 10% administrative fee to grants that we administer. Administration typically means reporting and communicating around the grant with the funding agency.
Let's back up on on the fees.
Mhm.
Why are they so low for non-members? That's you can't hire anybody for that. If you're going to do that, you might as well do it for free. That's what you're doing.
So the bigger issue here, and this is something that I frankly have seen industry wide, is that the people who need grants most are the people who can least afford the professional support for it.
Okay.
So even if it's a non-member, again, a lot of times we're working with nonprofits who anything beyond $25 an hour, even that, I think in a lot of cases is cost prohibitive. And I think a lot of time folks come to us with the expectation that they're going to get free support. So we were very mindful of keeping this low, and I think we can revisit it, and folks are able to absorb this cost. We can look at raising it, but I was very leery of if we were to do market rate, if you will. I think
I'm not suggesting market rate. This is not even close to what you would. It seems one step above nothing.
it is.
Okay.
But I mean, we have been doing this work for nothing for a while, so it's a small step in the direction of getting some money back.
And the idea is that it resembled my pay at an even amount, so it was somewhat matching that time, recouping rather than gaining, profiting.
Yeah, so we will not be getting rich off of our grant services by any means. But again, our hope is that it'll at least compel some folks to consider membership. Then we just have language here around the agreement. And for match, we will use, in cases where an in-kind contribution can be used for match, we will use the prior annualized hourly rate plus benefits and indirect costs to account for that. And then we have program-specific policies. So this again is BGS. Here in the past, we were doing BGS applications for members and non-members at no cost. So the change now is that if you are a business that wants to do a BGS application, there's a $100 fee. For non-members, no fee. And BGS can be somewhat time-consuming. MBRC is really dictated by MBRC policy. So this is an area where our policies really have to reflect the requirements of MBRC. Finally, rural business development. This is another one where very recently, or most recently, we applied on behalf of the town of Addison. Through our experience specifically with that application, we found that this one is very time consuming. So this is one instance where whether you're a member or non-member, there will be a fee so that we can recoup those costs. So that's just a quick run through of the fees. And then again, section C here really just updated this so that instead of requiring board approval for every application, it just indicates that staff will be empowered to execute grant services agreements and will report to the board when we've executed those agreements.
No, in that, I don't know whether it's that section, but I thought I read something about if it requires money from our
Yes.
own agency, it does have to go to the board.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's really carried over from our bylaws. So
Mhm.
there is language actually here in a few places throughout this policy that clearly indicates that in any case where we will be expending actual cash, actual money out of ACEDC coffers, we will have to go to the board for approval. So again, what will be voted on today is this clean copy here. And at the very bottom of this, you'll see just for a little background, we have dates of when this policy was originally drafted, reviewed, and approved, followed by the last amendment that was made in January 2024. I don't know off the top of my head what that amendment entailed, but the second amendment, if approved today, represents the changes that we just reviewed. So any questions, comments on grant policy updates?
Alex, are you, bit of an aside, but are you tracking hours that are spent on administering by grants? So we can
Yes.
sort of hone in on these numbers over the years.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just for context, so folks are aware, in my position, I spend very little time. I'll be spending much more time now with Camille's departure on grant administration, but a lot of that tracking occurs within Camille's role. So in order to get our administrative fees, we're required to track those. So we can always present a comparison of what programs we spend a lot of time on, what other ones are not quite as time consuming. But for example, not to go down the rabbit hole here, but like MBRC, in terms of our budgeting in the past, that was a major revenue driver of grants. The reality is right now, our MBRC administration requires next to no time. We're literally invoicing people for preparing invoices. So we're getting $16.80 a month from folks that we're doing MBRC Catalyst grants for. And then BGS grants, which require a lot of time, both in terms of preparing applications and then doing it, the administration, the closeout, we historically have gotten no money for. So again, kind of an imbalance, I think, in the way that we charged and administered grants previously. So.
Any other questions for Alex on that? So we do need to take action on that. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Moved, is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. All right, the motion is carried. Thank you, Alex. So next, we have some research. Is
Yes.
that true?
Yes, I will do just a quick overview and intro and then hand it over to Anna. So again, as folks know, housing was a new component of our operating strategy this year, and it's something that we've really prioritized as a staff and spent a lot of time on. So to support those efforts, we hired Anna for the summer to work on a really kind of remote basis with Camille to support a deep dive into research around housing and to start to formulate some strategies that we can employ. So Anna is going to present today on first the research that her and Camille did, as well as some strategies that they're recommending for us. In this process, I really encourage them to build off of the work and the strategies identified in our operating strategies. So you'll see here that many of these strategies align with our operating strategy, but there are some new ideas in there that I'm pretty excited about. So I think this is a great step forward and first of all, informing us on the housing issue and giving us some steps we can take to implement strategies again that we've already talked about and some new strategies that we can take into the next year. So really excited with the outcome of this work from Anna and Camille. So with that, I will hand it over to Anna Busha.
Okay, yeah, I'm Anna, and I'm excited to talk to you guys about Vermont's housing crisis and what Addison County Economic Development Corporation, what role they can play in really trying to address it. So to start off, Vermont has a severe shortage of housing. By 2029, the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment estimates that we need around 36,000 homes to be able to meet current demand. The vacancy rate for rentals is currently 3%. This is well below a healthy market rate of 5%. And what this is doing is it's driving up costs. Over an estimated over 4,000 Addison County households are currently cost burdened. This is when 30% or more of a household's income is designated towards housing-related expenses. And so the economic impact of this is that when housing is unaffordable, households are going to be unable to save for their future. This is going to severely limit their economic mobility. And also specifically in regards to ACEDC and their work, this is going to lead to workforce shortages as workers are going to be unable to relocate and find adequate housing. This overall is going to stagnate economic growth. And we can see on the right that 42% of Vermonters surveyed by the Vermont Futures Project actually recommend that young Vermonters leave Vermont. This is, again, going to have very substantial impacts for workforce shortages. So again, as mentioned before by Alex, housing previously hasn't really been a focus of ACEDC, but to really meet the goals of fostering an environment that businesses can thrive in and where people can find work, the housing crisis does need to be addressed. So if we're looking at what has led to the housing crisis, we can look at regulatory barriers. We see Act 250, which is Vermont's land use and development law, and municipal zoning. Both of these tend to prioritize the environment and keeping Vermont rural, which are good, but can come at the expense of housing developments, which might have a positive benefit on the community. Financial barriers via the high construction costs also tend to push developers away from housing developments and more towards just more profitable development types. Practical barriers come in the way of a lack of developers, as previously mentioned, and also local opposition, all of which we will talk about. Okay, so the first strategy that ACEDC should follow is to focus on municipal zoning reform. So zoning laws really play a pivotal role in determining what land can be used for what, and therefore really shapes housing development. Common barriers in municipal zoning to housing development include single-use districts, minimum lot size requirements, caps on housing density, a lack of access to wastewater systems, and long approval processes. And so to try to address this and help municipalities with zoning reform, ACEDC should use their grant writing experience and expertise to connect municipalities with the municipal planning grant and offer their grant writing services. So the municipal planning grant between 2020 and 2024 has offered $2.8 million in state funding for municipalities. This can go towards hiring consultants and just paying for the updating of zoning bylaws. In the 2023 Vermont Planning Survey, almost half of respondents had never heard of the grant opportunity, meaning that it's potentially underutilized here in Addison County. Also, many of the survey respondents indicated that municipalities need help with grant writing, and this aligns with ACEDC staff experience. Additionally, ACEDC should form a partnership with the ACRPC to advocate for smart growth policies. These are focused on concentrated development around downtowns and villages, while leaving surrounding areas more rural and undertouched. Part of this is mixed-use land reform. We see in Middlebury, Virgins, and Bristol that there's a lack of ability in the current zoning bylaws to build build residences in commercial and industrial districts. Having mixed-use land reform will allow for infrastructure to be properly utilized and just allow people to be living closer to the buildings and the jobs that they wish to work at. In this partnership, ACDC should really try to utilize their economic and business expertise to help with this zoning reform.
And I will mention, as folks are likely aware, we do have, we get a $15,000 contribution from ACRPC annually for grant writing assistance. So this is a partnership we have, but to my knowledge, historically, we have not been active in supporting municipal planning grant applications. So I think we can use our existing partnership with ACRPC to really create a strategy around how we're supporting specifically those municipal planning grants. Sorry.
Yeah, good. And then the second and third strategy are both going to be targeting the high construction costs. A single unit apartment in a multifamily building costs an average of $500,000. This has increased by 30% annually since the pandemic, part of which is due to increasing interest rates, uncertainty with tariffs, and construction workforce limitations. So to try to combat this, ACDC should try to connect building owners with the downtown and village center tax credit. This credit ranges from 10% to 50% depending on the credit type. We have facade, code, flood mitigation, and historic. And qualifying buildings must be located in a downtown or village center, be at least 30 years old, and not be used as a personal residence. So some examples of how this has previously been used is we see this building on Main Street, Montpelier, that got a little under $140,000. This was around a fourth of the total cost of the project, so a very significant funding opportunity. And it converted the second and third floors, which previously were underutilized office spaces, into 7 apartments in the heart of Montpelier. And then on the right, we can see this house in Vergennes, which got $250,000 in funding to convert this underutilized home into 22 units of senior living. So in the next slide. So while big developments like Stonecrop, which have 45 homes and 35-unit apartment buildings, tend to look good, especially when we're looking at that $36,000 or 1,000 home goal. Smaller developments fit better into Addison County's economy. We'll also talk about some of the big pushback that we can see with accompanying big developments like this. And so it really makes sense to try to focus on adding a couple apartment buildings or a new unit here and there, rather than try to focus on trying to have another Stonecrop, for example. And so to connect building owners with this tax credit, ACDC should advertise it in their resources for businesses and municipalities section of their newsletter. And they should also just assist in the application process. Applicants must be able to prove that there's going to be a positive benefit from the development. And so ACDC should really utilize their grant writing experience to try to, and their knowledge on housing to show why the creation of housing will have a positive benefit. The third strategy, again, is trying to tackle the high construction costs. It's to advocate for sale and use tax breaks. This is not new to Vermont. Vermont has the downtown sales tax reallocation program, where municipalities and developers can jointly apply for tax credits on construction materials. This is at the state level, but ACDC could try to encourage municipalities to adopt a similar program with a housing focus at the local level. This would make municipalities more competitive with each other and potentially draw in development to that area if that's what they like, and specifically encourage housing growth. By focusing on the local level, they can measure government, private, and public support or opposition to sale and use tax breaks. And then based off of that, they can then look at HO 438, which was a bill that was proposed last February, I believe, which added priority housing projects to the list of buildings that were eligible for tax exemption for construction materials. The bill was referred to the Committee on Ways and Means and has since died in the committee. ACDC could advocate with Vermont's other RDCs for its passing, which would make Vermont a more appealing building location for developers and potentially bring in housing developers. So the fourth strategy is really meant to combat public backlash against housing developments. NIMBYism stands for not in my backyard and is a common a common type of backlash that some developments face when they might have a positive net benefit on the community, but are located close to certain residences and houses. So for example, a affordable housing development might get some backlash with increased traffic, overcrowded schools, loss of property value, and shifts in neighborhood character. In Vermont, there is no right to develop after a housing development gets all of the necessary zoning permits, for example. They might still face backlash and not be able to develop because of NIMBYism. So to try to combat this, ACDC should host housing forums. Prior to this, they should survey members of Addison County to really assess housing attitudes and concerns, which should then be addressed in the forums, as well as discuss housing solutions and different barriers to the creation of housing. Along with the housing forums, ACDC should create a development scorecard. We hear a lot that all housing is good housing, and this isn't necessarily the case. The scorecard should try to present developments with a binary metric of their merit to try to increase ACDC's reliability in terms of housing advocacy, and also just show ACDC what housing projects they should really be advocating for. In creating this scorecard, ACDC should partner with town planners and the ACRPC to again really be a reliable source of housing advocacy. In the scorecard, they should find various criteria which they want to give a binary score on. Some proposed ones are a project's regulation compliance, environmental impact, timeline and funding, community impact, and creation of housing. So just an example of how this might work is if we're looking at a development's regulation compliance, we would give it a poor, fair, good, or excellent rating with points. And then we could look at the location. For example, is it in a more rural area or is it in an area that already has a lot of development? Does the development have the necessary permits? Does it adhere to the local zoning laws? Is the infrastructure going to be able to accommodate it? And will there be necessary parking? And then based on what ACDC wants to emphasize or de-emphasize in their rating, they can give more points or less points according to each category. And the fifth strategy is to try to address the shortage of developers in Vermont. Vermont has a very low population density, especially compared to some neighboring states. And also regulatory barriers, again, Act 250 and municipal zoning can kind of push development outside of Vermont. The development packet is meant to combat that while also bringing development into Addison County. So the development packet should highlight the benefits of building in Vermont, as well as recent legislative changes that encourage housing development. This spring, the Community Housing and Infrastructure Program was passed. This offers a new avenue for funding by changing how TIFs work. And Act 181 makes changes to Act 250, and in the coming years will likely make it easier to develop in more downtown areas that get a Tier 1 designation. The packet should also include potential development sites throughout Addison County, with particular focus given to areas with latent capacity. This is areas that have a historical high population that is greater than the current population, so that they can the infrastructure is likely adequate to accommodate more housing. This should be shared with regional developers and also developers in Vermont who have yet to build here in Addison County. So that is all I have for today. I firmly believe that by making incremental change, we can slowly build closer to getting to that 36,000 household goal.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank you.
You hit a lot of the points that we've been talking about for years and not moved on. This is really good.
Thank you.
So over the next few months, we'll bring, again, some of these items are already in our operating strategies, so we'll continue to work on some of these things and bring to the board. The scorecard is one that I would love to have a conversation with the board about in the future. Yeah, that's a new idea. Downtown tax credits, excited to say we actually worked with somebody recently on an application, so we have some staff experience with that now and really know, I think, how to promote that and guide people through that process. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff that we'll continue to act on and some other new ideas that we can entertain with the board. Any questions for Anna or staff on that? Okay.
All right. membership.
Retention.
Yes,
Thanks
so,
again, by the way. Good presentation.
so the last, two items for today, really just informational items, things that we want to, discuss with the board. So the first being membership retention. We are working hard to attract new members while also retaining existing members. So far this year in 2025, we have had 30 successful renewals, so 36 folks who have renewed. That's generated about $25,500 in membership due revenue, which is great. However, at the same time, from January to today, we currently have 25 open or active renewals. Among those 25, there's 2 or 3 where it's either a business that's gone out of business or somebody who is maybe outside the area that had a personal connection to us that doesn't exist anymore. But that still leaves about 20 to 23 members that have not yet renewed. The reason we're bringing this to the board today is that we, with our renewals, there's always an automated email that goes out to folks letting them know that the renewal date's approaching with a link to renew their membership. The effectiveness of that automated email, I would say, is minimal, negligible. So what that means is that we as staff very often, in almost every case, have to do direct follow-up with folks to encourage renewal. In a lot of cases, that's sending an email and folks will say, oh, yep, of course, I'll get right on that. We get the renewal, that's great. Other times it's multiple emails. It's me dropping in and leaving a card at an office and still getting crickets. And what's challenging is that in a lot of cases they're longtime members, and I'm not going to go into the specifics of any individual businesses or members today, but there are folks who've been members for a long time who are familiar with us and aware of us, but are still lagging in their renewal. With these currently 25 open renewals, that represents just under $15,000 in revenue. And again, in a lot of cases, these folks are renewing, but it takes a lot of follow-up and a lot of staff time. So the reason I'm bringing it to the board today is that I think this is a great item where we can really engage board members and look for some board support in leveraging the relationships of board members to go out to some of these folks and remind them, why ACEDC membership is valuable and why we could use their support. So what I would like to do is propose a one-off ad hoc committee meeting. So not a standing committee, not a regularly meeting committee, but really just a single meeting where we can get 3 or 4 board members to sit down with us, and we can really just divvy up that list and say, hey, here's 3 or 4 target members for each person. If you're comfortable, please go out, use that relationship, ask them to renew. In that meeting, we can discuss with board members our annual impact report, some of the numbers and statistics and talking points we use. So again, I think with one meeting with a handful of board members, we could come up with just a good, quick strategy to go after some of these folks and hopefully bump up that retention. So that's a very quick sort of overview of our retention efforts and just, again, some of the challenges we're facing. Some of the things we've discussed as a staff that we have started to implement is rather than waiting for that automated email to go out, letting folks know that the renewal is coming up in 30 days, we are now starting to be much more proactive in reaching out to folks, 2 or 3 months ahead of their renewal, just to say, hey, how's it going? Can we grab coffee, check in with you? And not leading with, hey, we need more money from you, but leading with that, hey, we're here to support you, having that conversation. So then 2 or 3 months later, when their renewal does come up, it hasn't been a year since they've seen us or heard from us. They've seen or heard from us recently, and we can leverage that connection to hopefully compel quicker renewals. But with that, I'll open it up to the board for discussion, and if folks want to volunteer to sit on this committee, again, we're looking at one meeting.
Don't we have a membership committee?
There was a membership committee that met in the past. I can look at that membership. Where again, I wanted to create some variation here was we're not looking for folks to start showing up at a monthly meeting indefinitely.
Where I'm going with this, you already have a standing committee
Okay.
that the people are part of. Why not have a meeting of that group?
Yeah, let me see what that.
Is the email that goes out sort of generic, plain vanilla?
Yeah,
Maybe we could improve that,
yeah. I think
make it a
that's
little
good
more
idea.
specific to that.
I'll be honest, half the emails I get from you guys go to.
Really? Oh, that's not good.
Even if you like try to click it's not junk and like
Yeah.
whitelist it.
So I think the
They
committee
go
we
in the
had
junk
was,
or the, not them, they definitely show up in the focus. Which is 90%. Yeah, okay.
I actually hate all that. Like it's good, but it's not.
Yeah,
Like
I really like it.
I like it,
But
but you
not
miss
as easy.
stuff too if you
Yeah.
don't check them.
there was a dues committee, I think discussing dues increases.
For some reason, I thought we had a membership committee.
I thought I had seen, and I don't know when that committee met, how recently it was. I'll go back and look, and I can send out an email if I can find that the membership of that standing committee. If it's been a few years since that committee met, though, then maybe folks on there who are not around anymore. But again, we'll just love to convene some folks to have that discussion.
I feel like in the past, when this comes up every year and Fred had us look at the list and organizations that we had a pre-existing relationship with, we would raise our hands and reach out to them. I mean, having a personal relationship with the person really helps. I don't know, that's my memory, but I could be wrong. I remember we have this discussion fairly regularly.
Maybe that's it. Maybe we put up that list.
Yeah, and I can share that list with folks. Again, I wanted to refrain
Yeah.
from going into detail on
Yeah.
individual members.
Yeah, not in this meeting.
Yeah, we will, staff will share that list, via email with the board, and we can carry on the discussion from there. All right,
Sounds good.
I'm gonna move on to,
Yeah, so board membership and recruitment.
yeah, so this is another informational item that'll likely lead to some more discussion over the next couple months. But we did have a conversation recently with the executive committee around some potential nominations to the board, which led to just a larger conversation on the board makeup, the number of seats, and also how we go about recruiting members for the board. So we had two folks recently who I've met with over the last couple months who I thought would be great fits for the board. Started discussions with these folks around their interest in serving on the board. They both expressed interest, so discussed this with the executive committee in the capacity of a nominating committee. And well, the executive committee, I think, was supportive of both of these individuals as potential board members. There was some discussion around the number of board seats and whether or not there was interest in increasing that number by appointing new seats or keeping that number where it is and making appointments as seats open up. So for reference, as of today, we have 13 seats. With Greg Faust, the new town administrator of Bristol, joining next month. That'll bring us to 14 seats. We do have Gina with her term ending at the end of this year, which will open up a seat in 2026. In 2026, I think we have Ryan, whose term will not be expiring, but will be coming up for renewal of his term. But otherwise, I don't think we'll have many existing seats opening up in the next year or two. So there's a discussion to be had around the number of board seats. The other thing I wanted to mention today is just our process for recruiting new board members. So this is something I also discussed with the executive committee. Historically, I think Fred was active in recruiting potential board members. And I think that is something that occurs with a lot of nonprofits, especially in small towns where you don't have a long wait list of folks waiting to get on boards. With that said, it's probably not the best practice to have an executive director populating the board that's responsible for overseeing their performance and directing them. I wholeheartedly agree with that. So with that in mind, with that said, my preference moving forward would be to not myself be proactively or really in any capacity asking people to serve on the board. If I happen to meet somebody who I think might have interest, might be a good fit, my plan in the future will be to just direct them to Jason as board president or members of the executive committee or a board member and say, hey, if this is something that might interest you, please meet with these people, talk with these people. But this, similar, I remember retention conversation is just another area where, I think we'll be looking to the board to take the lead in this rather than staff. So again, as a matter of practice, that's how I'll be moving forward. And just so folks are aware, when it comes to determining the number of board seats and board appointments, my understanding on the reading of the bylaws is that happens as a matter of formal business at our November meeting. So just again, decisions don't need to be made today, but if the board wants to have a conversation around changing the number of board seats, we would want to do that by November so that at our annual meeting rather, we can have that formal vote on the number of seats for the coming year. And again, if there are new appointments, we would have to present those folks at the annual meeting in November. So just wanted to present that to folks today. Again, we don't have to have any decisions, but we'd love to entertain some discussion, I think, on preferred number of seats and potential appointments.
Excellent. Thoughts?
Well, I think the number that we have now is a comfortable number. When boards get large, it gets unwieldy and you end up having people that are board members that don't participate and so on. I think we're actually around the number, which is a comfortable number. I mean, maybe one more or something like that, but
one of the things I mentioned is a very similar thing. The larger the board, the more everyone, there's no such thing as a board member who's not busy. And the larger the board, the more apt people are to be like, I got what's going on today. They won't mess me today. And you end up with situations where that happens a lot, and you end up with situations where you're not able to maintain a quorum, which is problematic from an operations standpoint. So
asking the existing members to do more may act as a filter.
Yes and no, so one of my big things that you've heard me talk about before is board governance, and some of the stuff that we talked about earlier as far as the grant policy, that comes down to board governance. And while there's some really good things we're doing with that policy, I think the next step is stepping back and looking at our governance and being like, okay, so we removed the safeguard. What other safeguards, are we okay with that? And what other safeguards need to be in place so that, the executive director understands what his role is, and how he's reviewed and what that overall matrix is. And I think that's a big conversation that we as a board need to have. I'm not a big fan of creating working boards per se, just because it really muddies the water with the executive director, and roles and responsibilities. The candidates that were talked about are very viable candidates. We should talk about that at a later date. And I think they bring a lot to the table, and it comes down to the balance of the board. But my concern is having board members for the sake of having board members is a very dangerous thing.
there was in the materials that we had on the website, not the website, but our board site, there was a list there. What list was that?
So I do, for reference, I do have a spreadsheet that we use to track our board roster, and that just shows, it shows a lot of things, but specifically what I thought might be helpful today was looking at when terms end and, renewals of terms, things of that nature.
But the one that I looked at was totally out of date.
So there's several tabs here in this spreadsheet.
Oh, and maybe I didn't go down far enough.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
one like master tab in here that has, board members going back to all the way to 2015
Oh, yeah,
and
okay.
2013 here. This is our current board roster. This is everybody here. So again, town of Bristol, it's unique. It's a designated seat, so that's just going to vacancy. But if you scroll across here, this is where you'll see, I believe this is Gina, who again, that dark orange, kind of burnt orange color represents an end of term. And that I believe is the end of a second 3-year term, not the end of a first. So like Ryan, for example, I believe he's here at the top.
Gina's is the end of a first year term,
Oh, it is the end of a first year term.
or first
3-year term.
What's the max? Is there a max?
My understanding is that you get appointed for a year with the ability to be reappointed for 2 3-year terms. And I think Gina's intention is to step down, but I'm kind of curious then if that's her first 3-year term.
That was her first 3-year term, and her intent is to step down
Okay.
because of her change in role.
I see. Okay. But then, Ryan up here, end of 2026 will be the end of his first 3-year term. So it could be renewed. And if you look, a lot of our current folks, going out to 27, 28 could theoretically do renewals. So the good news here is that, as far as top terms lineup, we don't have a glut of terms expiring where we're going to have a bunch of vacancies. Assuming we retain board members, I think we'll have some stability for the next few years, which would be great for me, great for staff, and great for the organization. But then again, the other part of this conversation today was also talking about, in cases where we may have interest in bringing somebody on, or, a need or interest in the future in expanding, that will again, I think, fall more so on the board than me. So.
Alex, I haven't looked at the bylaws recently, but you said the number is 13. Is that a fixed number in the bylaws? Or, I'm thinking about our bylaws at Middlebury because I do all the board work. We have a range, it cannot, can't be less than, cannot exceed. Is that how it's written?
Yes, so based on our bylaws, our minimum is 11 and our maximum is 20. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so adding 2 more would put us right in the middle.
So just to throw it out there, I did bring up some other thoughts during executive committee that we should talk about, but before we do so, I'd prefer to have a conversation outside the meeting with one of the other board members that it would potentially affect, and that they be here when we discuss it.
Yeah, and I'd refrain from bringing that up today since they're not here. But there may be a larger discussion just around designated seats and the role of those seats, but we can save that for a later date. I think my only ask of the board today would be the interest or the expectation for maybe bringing a discussion item forward. I'm thinking in October, and that could be just part of presenting a draft agenda for the November annual meeting. But part of that will be, okay, at the annual meeting, we will present, 14 as the number of seats to carry forward in 2026. But again, with Gina stepping down, that will create a vacancy. So, and it could be then that we just fix it at 13 for 2026. But if we want to keep it at 14 and have that vacancy, then we would want to have a nomination for that November meeting. So there is, I think, some.
I think it's a bigger conversation for September's meeting.
September? Okay.
There's no reason to, especially if we have people that are interested, I think pushing it off to October is too long.
Okay. So I'm making a note then to bring forward an agenda item in September to have a discussion around A, the number of seats, and B, depending on that conversation, the process or preference for then moving forward with an appointment if necessary. My thought is that that might then be, would that require action, formal action or formal vote?
Yes, so what we do is so if we're gonna add people, the process is the nominating committee would put forth those nominations, the board would accept those nominations, and then if it's a existing seat that's being filled, we have control over that. If it's adding and filling a seat that was previously not occupied, that's when it goes to the whole group at the annual meeting. So what I would say is we have what I consider two viable candidates, but what I'd ask everyone here and online to do is if you have someone in mind that you think would be a great addition to the board, brings a skill set or brings something that we don't currently have, please let me know, so that we're not just having a conversation around these two individuals, when there's other candidates out there, other people that we should be approaching. So just give that some thought over the next week or so, and then let myself or Alex know if you have someone in mind, and we'll talk about it at the executive committee meeting in 3 weeks. All right, you all set, Alex?
That's all I have.
Excellent. All right, we don't need an executive session. Is that still the case?
Yeah.
And therefore, we don't have any matters to discuss out of executive session. Unless anyone has any other business, I'd accept a motion to adjourn at this point.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hi.
All those opposed? This meeting is now adjourned, and the recording has stopped. Thank you, everyone.
Gail, you know how far it is to drive out there?
Far.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're taking 10
You're going
days
right
though.
over the
Road
Rocky
tripping.
Mountains at the beginning of.
Yeah,
May.
we're going
Always
actually to
snows in the
Toronto.
Rockies on Labor Day, so be aware of that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I'm really excited. I've never been anywhere between the coasts, so seen a lot. Nicole, just so you know, Bob and Nicole dropped off at around 8.
Okay.